You remember the smell of that kitchen in the morning, before you even opened your eyes, coal dust and tea, bacon fat if it was a good week, the sound of Dad downstairs before it was even light, boots on, coat on, gone, and you never once thought to ask him what he ate to do all that. This is the answer. 5 o'clock in the morning, still dark, the whole street quiet except for the sound of a milk float 3 roads over. He's already half awake because after 20 years on the early shift, the body doesn't need an alarm anymore. Feet hit cold lino. And before he washes, before he dresses, before he does a single other thing, he goes downstairs and puts the kettle on. Because in 1965, before anything else happened in a British working man's day, there was tea. Not the tea you make today, not a bag dropped in a mug with milk from a plastic bottle, a proper pot, warmed first with a swill of boiling water tipped out. Then 2 heaped spoonfuls of loose leaf, always loose leaf, PG tips or Taifu, filled to the brim, lid on, left to brew under a knitted cosy his wife made 3 Christmases ago. 4 minutes, no less, then poured through a small strainer into a proper cup and saucer, milk in first, always milk in first, 2 sugars. That first cup of tea in the dark, standing at the kitchen window looking out at a yard he could barely see, that was the beginning of every working man's day in Britain in 1965. And if you grew up in that house, the smell of that tea brewing at 5 in the morning is stored somewhere in you right now, and it will never leave. By 5:30 he needed something in him before the walk to the factory or the bus to the site or the ride to the pit. And what he had, what working men across Britain had every single morning in 1965, was a breakfast that today we have almost completely forgotten how to make properly. Porridge, not the instant kind, not the kind in a plastic pot you microwave for 90 seconds, rolled oats, a pinch of salt, water, always water, never milk in the cooking. Stirred slowly in a pan on the gas ring until it thickened into something that genuinely stuck to you, something that sat in your stomach through a cold morning. And a hard first 2 hours on the line without letting you down, served in a bowl with a little cold milk poured around the edge. Maybe a scraping of golden syrup if it was a good week, nothing else. That was breakfast, and it cost almost nothing, and it kept a man going from 5:30 in the morning until his break at 10. The oats were proper Scots oats, the kind that took 15 minutes of stirring, the kind that left the spoon standing up in the bowl. Nobody makes porridge like that anymore because nobody has 15 minutes to stand at a gas ring and stir, and nobody needs to. And that is exactly what was lost. The walk to work in 1965 was not something he thought about. It was just part of the day, 2 miles each way in all weathers. Boot leather on wet pavement, collar up, cap down, and in his coat pocket, because his wife had put it there while he was still lacing his boots, a piece of bread. Not a sandwich, just bread, thick white bread with a scraping of dripping from the tin by the stove, folded once, wrapped in greaseproof paper. That was his walking breakfast, the second one. The one that got him through the last half mile when the cold was really biting and the factory gates were just coming into view. Bread and dripping on the walk to work. There is an entire generation of British men who did this every single morning and never once thought of it as anything other than ordinary. It was just what you had in your pocket. It was just what kept you warm from the inside when the outside was doing its worst. 10 o'clock, the hooter goes, 10 minutes, not 9, not 11, 10 minutes exactly, and every man on the floor knew it. The tea came round on a trolley pushed by a woman everyone called by her first name and respected more than most of the foremen. Thick white mugs. Tea so strong it was almost brown, 2 sugars already in because she knew every man's order without asking. She'd been doing it since 1952. And with the tea, a biscuit, a digestive, 1 digestive biscuit per man per break, not as a treat, as a right. As something so established and so reliable that if it had ever not been there, there would have been genuine industrial unrest. That 10 o'clock biscuit, that mug of tea. 10 minutes sitting on a crate or a bench or the edge of a machine with the noise of the factory briefly reduced to something bearable. That was the mid-morning break in 1965. It was not Instagram. It was not a wellness moment. It was 10 minutes of being a human being before you went back to being a pair of hands. 12:30, dinner, not lunch, never lunch. Dinner was the midday meal, and it was the most important meal of the working man's day. And if you called it lunch, he would look at you like you'd said something in a foreign language. Some men went home for dinner if they lived close enough. 15 minutes each way, 10 minutes to eat, back before the hooter. Their wives had it on the table the moment the door opened, a plate of something hot, always something hot. Because a cold dinner at midday was a failure in a way that went beyond just food. What was on that plate varied by the week and the wage and what was left from the weekend. But across Britain in 1965, the midday dinner of a working man almost always came from one of the same handful of dishes. Monday, it was the leftover meat from Sunday's roast, sliced cold with bubble and squeak made from the leftover vegetables, fried in the same pan until the edges crisp dark. Tuesday, it might be a broth made from the roast bones, thick with barley, and whatever root vegetables were cheap at the market. Wednesday, shepherd's pie, the last of the meat minced through and stretched with onion and stock, under a roof of mashed potato browned at the edges. Thursday, something from a tin, Heinz tomato soup with bread to dip, or baked beans on toast. And Friday, because Friday was payday and payday meant something, a proper plate. Sausages, mashed potato, onion gravy, the whole house smelling of it from the end of the street. That system, that weekly rotation of meals planned around one joint of meat, that is the thing that has disappeared. The whole architecture of feeding a family from almost nothing and making it feel like plenty. The works canteen was where you went if home was too far and the weather was too bad. It was not a restaurant. Do not mistake it for a restaurant. It was a long room with long tables and benches, staffed by women in white overalls and hairnets who served you without ceremony and without complaint, and got through 400 dinners in 45 minutes every single day. The menu did not change. Monday was always the same as last Monday. That was not a problem. That was the point. You knew what you were getting before you walked through the door. Meat and potato pie. That was the staple in 1965. A thick, short-crust pastry case filled with diced meat, usually shin beef or mutton, and chunks of potato in a thick brown gravy. Baked until the pastry was pale gold and the inside was steaming, served with mushy peas on the side. A ladle of extra gravy if you asked nicely, bread and butter included in the price. Sixpence, a hot meal, a pudding if you wanted one, and a mug of tea. Sixpence. And every man on that site could afford sixpence because if he couldn't, somebody would quietly sort it out. Because that was also what the works canteen was, a place where nobody went hungry if the others could help it. 3 o'clock, another break, another mug of tea, this one shorter than the morning break, 7 minutes if you were lucky. And no biscuit this time, just the tea and the chance to sit down for a moment and feel your feet stop aching. This is the break that nobody ever writes about. The 10 o'clock break has a kind of romance to it. The 3 o'clock break is just endurance, just getting through, just the knowledge that there are 2 more hours. He drank his tea standing up because the bench was taken. He looked out of the high window at a patch of grey sky. He thought about nothing in particular. He finished his tea, put the mug back on the trolley, and went back to work. That was 3 o'clock in a British factory in 1965. Unremarkable. Repeated 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year. And there is more dignity in it than most people will ever understand. 5 o'clock, the hooter, coat on before the noise has even stopped, cap on. Out through the gates with 500 other men all moving in the same direction, all carrying the same tiredness, all thinking about the same thing, what's for tea? The evening meal in a working-class British home in 1965 was tea, and it was waiting for him when he got home because his wife had timed it to the minute. She knew what time the bus got in, and she had it on the table within 5 minutes of his key in the door. He sat down first. That's how tired he was. What was on that table depended on the day, but it was most likely one of these. Liver and onions, sliced ox liver, dusted in seasoned flour, fried quickly. Because overcooked liver turns to leather, and a working-class cook knew that. Or toad in the hole, sausages laid in a roasting tin, a Yorkshire pudding batter poured over. Then the whole thing into a hot oven until the batter had risen up in great golden billows. These were not recipes he thought about. This was just tea. This was just what happened at 6 o'clock every evening. And the fact that it appeared on the table hot and ready, the labour that went into producing that reliability, the planning and the timing and the skill of it, that was taken completely for granted. And we have never properly accounted for that. 8 o'clock, the children are in bed. The washing up is done. The news is on the wireless or the television. They got a television in 1963. Second-hand, 12 inches, black and white, and it was the most exciting thing that had ever come into that house. And now, the last thing of the day, the supper. Not a meal, not a proper sit-down, just something to round the evening off before bed. Something warm, something simple. Something that said the day is done and you can stop now. Supper in 1965 was almost always one of the same few things. A cup of Ovaltine or Horlicks made with hot milk, stirred until it dissolved into something thick and malty and warm. With 2 plain biscuits on the side, rich tea, digestives, never anything fancy. Never anything fancy, just a simple treat to end the night. Just something to hold while you watched the end of the news and felt the day leaving your body. Or bread and cheese, a thick slice of white bread, a wedge of strong cheddar, proper strong cheddar, the kind that crumbled when you cut it and left the knife smelling of it, and a few pickled onions from the jar that lived permanently at the back of the pantry shelf. Eaten at the kitchen table with a last cup of tea before bed. Or if it was cold, and in 1965 it was often cold because central heating was something other people had, a bowl of soup heated from a tin, Heinz Oxtail, Heinz tomato, Campbell's chicken, poured into a pan, brought to a simmer, poured into a bowl, and eaten with bread to dip, warming from the inside when the coal fire in the other room wasn't quite doing enough. That was the end of his day. That was supper in a British working-class home in 1965. That was the end of his day. That was supper in a British working-class home in 1965. He went to bed at 10:30. He was asleep within minutes because his body had nothing left. He set the alarm for 5. He did it all again tomorrow. He never once went to a gym, never counted a calorie, never read a word about nutrition or macros or gut health. He ate what his wife made from what they could afford, and it was enough. It was always enough, because she made it enough. And somewhere in this country right now there are people in their 70s and 80s who sat at that table as children, who watched their fathers come through that door and sit down without taking their coats off, who remember exactly what was on that plate. This video is for them, and if any of it brought something back, leave it in the comments. Tell us what was on your table, because those memories deserve to be somewhere permanent before they are gone.